Welcome back. In this lecture, we'll learn iterators. Iterator is an object that can be iterated through, and iterator object implements iterator protocol that has iter and next functions. Python has iterable objects, and some of them are lists, tuples, dictionaries, sets, and string. We can iterate these objects through iter function, and we'll cover the following topics: how to iterate strings, how to use for loop to iterate an iterable object string, and how to iterate tuple object and use for loop to iterate an iterable object tuple. Now let's see the demo. Go to our IDE and project, practice new Python file, and let's name it iterators demo, and let's add the comment iterators demo. Now let's try to iterate strings by using iter and next functions. Let's create a string str by assigning string value to it, that is Python, and let's create an string iterator by using iter and passing the string to it. So that is how we can create an string iterator object. So this iter returns an iterator using iter function. So here we are able to create string iterator object. So now once we have this iterator object, we can use the next function and pass the iterator to return each value inside an iterator object. Now let's try to print this and see the value that is returned. So Control S and right click, run iterators demo. So now we can see the value p. So that is the first value inside the iterator object. Now similarly we have total 6 values. So let's try to run this by adding this statement 6 times. Now save it and run. So now you can see Python is printed in the console. So here we are trying to iterate string object and add this comment as well, so we can see in the console. Now run it. So now we are able to iterate string iterator object by using iter and next functions. So by using the iter we can create an iterator object, and using the next function we can return the value inside the iterator object. Now let's use for loop to iterate an iterable object, that is string. So let's try to print this and use the for loop for string1 in string print str1. So here we are trying to iterate using for loop the iterable object string that we created earlier, and assigning each value to str1 and trying to print the value inside str1. Now let's run it. We see the same output Python. So now you know the difference between iterator object and iterable object, that is string. So similarly let's try to iterate tuple object by using next and iter functions. So let's try to print this so we can see in the console. Let's create a tuple object with the values Monday to Friday and name it tuple1. Now just how we created string iterator, create tuple iterator tuple1, pass tuple1 to iter, and that returns tuple iterator. Now once we get the iterator, iterate through. Let's use the same code and iterate. Here in this case it is tuple object, and use the tuple iterator. Here we only have 5 elements, so let's use this statement 5 times. Now let's run it. So now we can see we are able to iterate a tuple object. Initially we created an iterator, that is by passing tuple object to iter function, and that returns an tuple iterator, and by using the next function we can iterate this tuple iterator to return the each value inside the tuple object, that is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday. So that is how we can iterate an iterator object, that is string iterator and tuple iterator. Now let's use for loop to iterate an iterable object, that is tuple. So let's print the same code so we can see in the console. And for tuples in tuple 1, print tuples. So now let's try to run this. So now we can see the values inside the tuple object are printed in the console. So that is how we can create an iterator and return an iterator object and run the values using the next function, and use for loop to iterate an iterable object, that is tuple. So similarly you can iterate the other iterable objects, that is lists, dictionary sets, etc. Just mention the comment here. Similarly we can iterate other iterable objects, that is list, dictionary, sets, etc. In the next lecture we'll learn modules. See you in the next lecture.